Today, I wanted to talk about the subject of stealing. There's a lot of things you can steal from another human being. And there's a lot of different ways you can go about stealing from someone. So you can steal their reputation, you can steal their free time, you can steal their sleep, you can steal their peace, you can steal their parenting. You can undermine someone's parenting. There's so many things you can steal from someone close to you. So with that in mind, I want to remind the loved ones of an addict that sleep is sacred. Sleep is really, really important. In fact, if we don't get sleep, we put ourselves at risk for a lot of, illness. We can compromise our immune system. Mental illness comes in. But most commonly, what happens if you're not getting sleep is that your ability to set boundaries and say no is compromised. So it's essential that certain hours in your home are sacred. And I know so many of you are suffering through someone acting like a 10-year-old, shouting at a screen and, gesticulating and making all kinds of noise and disrupting an entire household so that no one's functioning well in that household. So I would put some boundaries around this issue of stealing sleep. Sleep is sacred. It is absolutely essential for people to, relate to one another in peaceful, healthy, and reasonable ways. And I'll say it again. When you disrupt someone's sleep, you interfere with their ability to say no and set boundaries. So that's one of the things that goes on with gaming addiction is it just dominating the whole household. And so they get their way at all times. Um, so it's something to be thinking about. Okay, so there's the subject of stealing, and then I'm just going to quickly do a pivot, is because addicts lie, manipulate, and steal continuously. They are also inviting our judgment. It's like they're setting up this stumbling block for us to just trip over and condemn them. And so that's also something that you really need to keep in mind that um, the addiction, the disease of addiction invites judgment and wrath upon the addict, right? Um, and there's one more thing I felt compelled to say is that it's so important to remember that no one gets away with anything. That the minute someone wakes someone up at night, there's some consequences. They're immediate for that person, whether it looks like it or not. When someone doesn't clean up after themselves, there are immediate consequences. And I'm not talking about you having to pick up after someone who doesn't care whether the environment is clean or not. It's that we're all supposed to take responsibility for ourselves. And when we don't do that, there are immediate consequences. We've just sort of committed a crime, you know? When you make a mess and leave it in the sink and go, oh, let someone else pick it up, you've committed a crime. And it's a crime against yourself. I think, when you go outside and you help shovel the walk or you rake the leaves, you win. You got some exercise, you got some fresh air, you engaged in manual labor, which is of itself a reward. And when you don't do those things, the loss is immediate. You lose. and sometimes you just keep losing. So as we're judging or thinking we can sit in judgment on another person, it's so helpful to remember that no one gets away with anything. They lose immediately. They lose intimacy, respect from others, self-respect, relationships. They're losing valuable things at all times. And then there's the bigger consequences that God will mete out in God's timing. So it's coming. It's coming. It's just not our judge to play God and punish other people. We've got to live as graciously as we can with one another. And it's tough to do when you've got someone who, is taking advantage of the situation by not cooperating, when you've got an addict in your life. So all that's the warm up for February 18th. So February 18th, daily practice of the Al-Anon program is helping me to become more tolerant of other people. For example, when I take my own inventory and examine my motives, I recognize the same shortcomings I once eagerly pointed out in others. It's easier to accept the limitation of others when I acknowledge my own. I see now that my thinking has often been distorted, my behavior inconsistent. If my perceptions of myself have been so inaccurate, how reliable can my perceptions of others be? I really don't know what anyone else should think, feel, or do. Therefore, I can no longer justify intolerance. Regular, dedicated practice of the principles of the program keeps me feeling good about myself. This permits me to be increasingly open-minded and considerate toward everyone in my life. Today's reminder: Al-Anon meetings, fellowship, steps, traditions, and literature all help me to improve my ability to relate to others. I will renew my commitment to recovery today. And the quote is, an earnest and concentrated study of the Al-Anon program in depth will help us to become more tolerant, confident, and loving, teaching us to accept the faults of others and seek to correct shortcomings in ourselves. The dilemma of the alcoholic marriage. And there's just one little caveat I want to put in here at the very end, that these things are so true. They really ring true, that we really can't assess what's going on in another person's life. But there are people who are broken from early childhood. They have personality disorders and they're completely unable to cooperate in a marriage. And they're highly destructive, aggressive, and passive aggressive. And so in those situations which are abusive, you want to extract yourself from the situation if you are able. Peace and love to all of you.